Hello, I want to show you this graphite pencil sketch of a maple tree, and the reason why I'm doing this in graphite is because I normally draw in charcoal, and some people ask me if you can do the same thing in graphite. The answer is of course you can, but it will take a little bit more time and it will be a little bit lighter in value, and you also have to use more than one pencil for some of the lighter and darker tones. Now later I'm gonna turn this into a full scene, landscape drawing, but I'm gonna do that in a separate video. For now, let's have a look at this sketch of a maple tree. I'm gonna work on a slightly smaller piece of paper, about 6 times 8 inches in size. This is Fabriano sketching paper, if I'm not mistaken. As for my tools, I'm going to be using graphite pencils, like I said. I'm going to be using this HB Stadler graphite pencil for much of my drawing. It's a very good all-round pencil for sketching and drawing and writing. I'm also going to be using this softer 8B pencil. This one is a Kohinoor, so I'm going to be using that for darker tones. In addition to these, I'm also going to be using some blending tools. I'm going to be using a brush and a tortilla for blending, and for erasing I'm going to be using mostly this kneaded eraser. This one I believe is a Faber-Castell, but it doesn't really matter what brand you have, as long as you mold it and reshape it like this, because you have to keep doing that to keep it functional. I find that these regular erasers or pencil erasers don't work quite as well as kneaded erasers when working with graphite, because graphite is a lubricant, and I think that kneaded erasers are better because they lift up that graphite, and I think they just do a better job as long as you keep kneading them. Anyway, now let's get on to the sketch. First I'm going to make a couple of lines at the bottom and at the top of the tree, or where I think the bottom and the top of the tree will be, to give myself a rough idea about the size of the tree and the position. Now, like I said, I'm going to be turning this into a full scene some other time, and I'm going to draw a small landscape, but for now I'm just going to draw this tree here. I'm starting with a tree trunk and some branches. Now when it comes to drawing branches, I can't really give you any specific advice on how you can draw them best, because I think their shape largely depends on the type of the tree and some other stuff, but in general you just want to try to make them bend and twist and taper towards the ends, so as long as you do this they should look realistic. Also, another thing that you'll notice is that I'm deliberately making them sort of discontinued, and I'm doing the same thing with the tree trunk, because I want to make it look like some of them are obscured by the canopy, by the leaves. Now what you can also do is draw the full structure, draw all of the branches and the trunk, and then erase some portions of them where the leaves are supposed to be. But you can also do this. I can just plan where some of the branches and some of the trunk is going to be visible, and then I just draw the leaves on top. Now I'm using that softer 8B pencil to draw some of the darker portions, and these are going to be right under the leaves. Some of these parts of the tree are deeper inside the canopy and they're getting less light, so obviously they're going to be a lot darker. Now I'm going to start scribbling and drawing the outer shape of the tree. And as you can see, my strokes are really short. To you they may seem like they're circular, but I'm mostly going back and forth. But you have to vary direction like this. You have to vary your direction to make it look as natural as possible, because you don't want to make it too uniform and regular. You have to change direction and you have to change the shape so that you can make it look as organic and as realistic as possible. And as for the outer shape, you can just make it as rough and as irregular as you like. That's also a good idea. And occasionally you can draw some of these leaves or groups of leaves which appear slightly detached from the rest. So I'm just going to keep doing that, using the same approach all over this tree. And later, as I progress with it, I will try to vary the amount of value and pressure in certain areas, because I'm going to want to break up that canopy into multiple segments to give it some structure. But for now, it mostly looks 2D, and I'm just mostly working on the general shape, while at the same time throwing in a few details here and there. So I have to keep in mind where these branches will be visible, so I don't want to put too much of those leaves there. I mostly work around them and leave some of the white spaces around those branches. You're going to want to have some areas where the light is coming through from the back. And by the way, this is going to be a longer video, obviously, even though it's a fairly small sketch. But the reason why I try to avoid time-lapse too much is because some people also complained that they would rather watch this in real time. So I did a combination of real time and just a little bit of time-lapse. I increased the speed in some parts just a little bit, not too much, so that you can see as much of this process as possible. So I kind of compressed it in just under half an hour, but in real time I think it was around 45 minutes or so. Obviously it can be done faster, and with charcoal it can be done quite a bit faster. But now I'm going to start working with this HB, rather 8B graphite pencil again. And I'm going to make some of these branches a little bit darker. And maybe make a few suggestions of small branches in between these groups of leaves. But like I said, in general, the branches that are just under the tree, under the leaves, are the darkest because they're getting less light, and the part of the trunk lower near the ground will be a little bit lighter because the shadow is not covering it. So I think you can see the structure and the shape of my tree now. I think it's starting to look like a real tree, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm just going to keep doing this scribbling thing all over the canopy, and then later adding some portions of lighter and darker value in order to break it into multiple segments. And I have to add a little bit on these lower branches as well. Although there will be fewer leaves there. To make this look better, you sort of have to try to resist the temptation to cover it very quickly. Because you'll produce something that looks kind of artificial and, well, not real. It doesn't really look like foliage. I'm going to try to make this right side just a little bit darker. To start working on the structure of the canopy a little bit more. I'm starting to break this into segments. Because when looked at from a distance, you can see these larger clusters of leaves which form around the bigger branches. So I'm just randomly going in between certain areas and making them a little bit darker. I'm still not using the 8B for this, but I'll get to it a little bit later. Right now I just want to get the most of my HB before I move on to this one, to the 8B. And now I'm kind of reinforcing those areas with a pencil of an even darker value with an even softer pencil. Now when working with charcoal, it's pretty straightforward because you can pretty much use just one pencil. I normally use a woodless charcoal pencil for most of my drawings, but you can also use some other types of charcoal pencils. I find that a medium charcoal pencil gets most of the job done pretty well. But with graphite, if you want a range of value that is needed to create depth and volume, you have to use different grades of pencils. You have to use at least a couple of different pencils. In portraits, when working with graphite, I used to use at least 5 or 6 of them. For a simple drawing of a tree like this, you can use just 2, one harder and one softer, and it'll be fine. But for portraits, I would recommend using several pencils at least. Graphite is slower than charcoal, like I said, but I've worked with graphite before. I worked with it a lot in the past, and graphite pencils do have their appeal, they do have their advantages. It's just that I prefer charcoal. And I also find that charcoal is more suitable for drawings, for recording drawings on YouTube, because it's faster to work with. Graphite pencil drawings can be pretty impressive when you see them on a high-res photo, for example, or in real life for that matter. But then on the other hand, charcoal is a lot darker and gives you a lot more contrast. You can see that I'm using my tortillon also for some of these areas. I won't destroy all of my texture. I'll just soften it a little bit, because I don't want the areas which are covered with foliage to remain white. I need the areas where the light is coming through in between the branches. I need those to be lighter than the canopy. That's why I lightly blend what I've done so far with a brush and a tortillon. And now you can see that I'm going back in with a soft graphite pencil to further work on these segments. And add even more depth to the tree. So I already made a number of tutorials on how to draw trees, and some people are probably going to find it boring. That's fine, you don't have to see all of them. I do plan to do one more. One has to do, the one that will have to do with pastel. or pastel pencils and soft pastels. It's a medium that I plan to do a little bit more work with in the future. While I'm doing this, I would like to take an opportunity to remind you that if you like my content, give me likes, subscribe to my channel and click the notification icon. Also check out my other videos I have. I have all kinds of videos, all kinds of content. I have portraits, I have landscapes, so there's lots of things to watch and see on my channel. And every view and every like counts, obviously. This is still a small channel. You can see that I'm using a slightly different approach now. My strokes are kind of discontinued here. I'm almost making small dots here and there, trying to add a little more texture and break those darker areas into several separate pieces. And adding a few of these darker dots on the lighter areas as well, to make them look even more complex. And now I'm gonna do a little bit of work with a kneaded eraser. As you can see, you need to mold it to create this fine tip, and then you just dab a little bit and you try to pick up some of the graphite and create lighter areas in your canopy. But like I said, you have to keep kneading it and reshaping it, because the tip that you create stops being effective very quickly for two reasons. First, it picks up the graphite, and second, it becomes dull, so you always just knead it again a little bit more and you create a new tip, and you start dabbing all over again. It's important not to get frustrated with this process, because sometimes somewhere you won't be able to lift up that much graphite, so you just have to seize the opportunities that the drawing is giving you. When you find an area where you can lift up a little bit, and that's another advantage when drawing landscapes and trees. You don't have to worry about likeness, you just have to draw something that looks like a tree, and it doesn't matter if every leaf is in its proper place. In fact, the more random, the better. So a few more dabs here and there. I talked about using the kneaded eraser before. Essentially you can use a dragging motion or a dabbing motion. When you use a dragging motion you will tend to erase more, but here with this fine tip very light dabbing was more suitable. And now I'm going back in with an HB pencil and just adding a few darker areas in between my highlights, maybe trying to refine those highlights a little bit, adding a few dots here and there to make the texture a little bit more interesting in those places where I lost a little bit of texture because of the blending with a brush or a tortillon. And you can also do a few tapered strokes here and there in certain areas when you want to make them just a little bit darker. It won't ruin your texture, but it will add a little bit of value to certain areas. You can stop this process at any time, obviously. I'm just adding more and more detail because I want to make it look better, but obviously it's up to you to decide on how complex you want it to look. Right now I'm using the kneaded eraser to clean up these white spaces in between the branches where the light is coming through. These are also very important because we want to make it look like the canopy is not a solid object, like it's broken into many pieces and there's light coming through. So some of these portions need to be a lot lighter. And depending on the type of the tree and the density of the foliage, you would have probably more of these. So with some of the types of trees there would be a lot more of these white spaces in between the leaves. And here's the finished drawing. I decided it was time to put the pencil down. This is probably good enough. I hope you enjoyed this small tutorial of a maple tree in graphite pencil. I'm gonna be drawing some more trees in pastel some other time, but that's it for now. If you want to see some more tree drawing videos, I'm going to put some links in the description. Also, don't forget to check out some of my other videos. I have some other stuff as well if you're interested in portraits. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video and bye for now.